Welcome back, everyone. It's me, Matt. Thanks for joining me. We're looking once again at the absolutely beautiful Warrior Infantry Fighting Vehicle. And folks, I need your help. I have an idea, and it's a little wild and wacky. And if you're watching this from a third party, maybe you are the Ministry of Defense, the British Army, or some other advocate for this particular vehicle system, I really hope that this message can be shared as much as possible. Folks, Warrior is on its way out. I have served with Warrior extensively through my British Army career. Of course, now a Canadian Army veteran, I still have a fond fascination for Warrior. It saved my life, it saved my friends' lives, and I cannot express in words or through this video how much I really do love this platform. And I know many of you out there will probably agree that the Warrior is probably one of the best infantry fighting vehicles of the world, but unfortunately she is due to retire, and for all good reason. She is a older platform. She's been, from the 1780s, still utilized today, but soon to be replaced. What with, we're not entirely sure yet. Of course, Boxer is out there, Ajax replacing CVRT, but I still think Warrior, had a lot of capability that it could have had with the upgrade, but I'm actually kind of glad the British Army cut their losses and have decided to really try something else. However, it leaves a huge question. What are we doing with all the old Warriors? And I have a number of people in the community that kind of do research and deep research into this particular question, and from what I've been kind of told, and I don't know if this is a fact or not, Warriors are basically going to be scrapped or potentially mothballed. They are not, as far as I know, going to Ukraine. Why? I don't know, and I don't need to know. But this video pertains to that question because I feel Warrior has a home, one of them, in Canada. What do I mean by that? Well, if these vehicles are to be scrapped, which would be honestly truly heartbreaking to me to see an entire fleet of Warriors going to the scrapyard, and I think it's only fair that Warrior is given, at least a certain amount of Warriors are given to museums. Now, the United Kingdom has a number of Warriors that have been utilised, I think, for shows, particularly Tankfest, with the Bovington Tank Museum, which one day I will get to and visit. Of course, I love going there. Last time I was there was when I was a child, actually, so it's almost my duty to get back there and take a look at Bovington Tank Museum. But as many of you may have been involved or aware of, I last year was able to go to the Canadian Tank Museum, previously known as the Ontario Tank Museum, and I had an absolute blast. It was so much fun. But when I started hearing about Warrior going into basically a potential scrapyard, I said to myself, why can't the Canadian Tank Museum take one of these Warriors that eventually will be retired from British Army service for their own collection? And why am I saying this? Well, many of you are like, well, Matt, it's a British vehicle. Why would Canada and a Canadian Tank Museum in Toronto need a Warrior? Well, need is a strong word. What I'm trying to say is, why wouldn't the British Army look at, or the Ministry of Defence, look at sending a Warrior to Oshawa, or in Ontario to the Tank Museum? Well, we have to look at why Warrior is so prevalent to Canadian heritage. British Army Training Unit Suffield, which I've done a number of videos on in the past, is a training establishment, still somewhat active today, but really has nothing left in it, has a huge, absolutely huge connection to the British Army Warrior fleet. I would say at least 40 to 50% of the British Army's Warriors at any one time were being utilised on training exercises in BATUS through the history since the 80s up until the late 2000s. And unfortunately, due to the nature of COVID and the dynamic of the world and whatever else, political reasons, the vehicles got pulled from BATUS. And it was really sad to see the trains taking all the Warriors home to be utilised in whatever configuration they're being used now in the UK, and exercises for, of course, what's going on in the world. But let's not get into the politics here. Warrior has a huge history and presence here in Canada, of course, particularly Alberta, but Alberta doesn't have a tank museum. BATUS is still there, still open, but we don't have the ability to showcase Warrior. I mean, if I was able to say, hey, British Army, can you give me a Warrior so I can put it into a local museum here in where I live in Lethbridge, then I could actually do that. I actually have a friend who owns a museum in the city limits and could actually have one, but that's totally unrealistic. But I have many contacts in the Canadian Tank Museum who would be more than happy to facilitate the transition of a decommissioned Warrior into their collection. Now, the Canadian Tank Museum already has a Gulf War reenactment fleet of CVRTs, and the presentation was incredible. I got to meet the crew members, got to meet the veterans that actually operated these particular CVRT platforms and their serial numbers in the Gulf War. If you want to go check out the video, I'll put it in the description box and highlight on screen right now. But it really brought a tear to my eye seeing British armoured fighting vehicles like CVRT being showcased to the Canadian public, with thousands of people showing up to see something that is also once again tied to BATUS. Prior to those soldiers going to Iraq in the first Gulf War, the veterans that were involved in these enactments, they went to BATUS. They utilised the CVRT platform in BATUS as a pre-deployment package before deploying to a war. Ironically, I did the same thing with Warrior. Before going to Afghanistan in OPERIC 8 2008, I came to BATUS, utilised Warrior extensively on multiple exercises, may I add, not just pre-deployment to Afghanistan, and it brought me into the world of Canada, loving Canada, moving to Canada, appreciating Canada, and of course now being an active serving member of the Canadian Armed Forces as a reservist in the artillery. Now, if a Warrior could be handed over to the Canadian Tank Museum, can you imagine the pride in those veterans that are serving and showcasing CVRT to work alongside Warrior? And can you imagine the pride I would have to be able to see something that I've operated with, seen, been saved my life in, protected others, being showcased to the Canadian public, thousands upon thousands of people, seeing this, piece of history that links to Canadian heritage and the dream that is, if you come to Canada and you come to BATUS, you get to operate with the most impressive fleet that we had at the time, and still to this day do. I think Warrior still is a fantastic fleet, and the Canadian public can see that firsthand. And I think visitors around the world can see, touch, feel, smell even. I mean, Warriors make a lot of smell when they're running hard. That experience is going to be right in front of them. And to put a vehicle just into a scrapyard, cut it down into scrap metal, instead of having something that can be showcased to the public, I mean, yes, of course, there's always going to be an agreement, This is a military piece of hardware, but it's no different to anything else that's been issued, I would say, to the public. There's CVRTs that run all over the place in the UK. There's some here in Canada. There's some in the United States. There's 432s also that have been handed to the public. Abbots. There's a lot of vehicles that have been shared to the private sector, but this would not be the public sector. It'd be a dedicated museum that could showcase the history and the heritage of this incredible infantry fighting vehicle. So where am I going with this? This is basically just a statement at the moment. Well, I need your help, folks. The Canadian Tank Museum is an amazing institution. It's dedicated to preserving the history and heritage of armoured vehicles. What better way to highlight the unique military relationship with the UK than by displaying a Warrior IFV that trained and served extensively right here in the country? This is where you come in. We need to rally together as a Matsimus community or just an armoured vehicle community to contact and convince the British Ministry of Defence and the British Army of the incredible value and potential of sending just one Warrior, and maybe more if they wanted to the Canadian Tank Museum in Oshawa, which is in Ontario, Canada. I'm asking you, my incredible audience, my followers, to help me make this happen. It is a life dream for this now. When it came into my mind, I was like, this has got to happen. I cannot let Warriors just be scrapped and not have the opportunity for the British Armed Forces, the MOD, the UK, the public of Canada and the UK to see and showcase something that has had such a huge, influential portion of military history for the UK in BATUS. Of course, it's not in BATUS, it will be showcased, but it will still be in Canadian public viewing, and this is where I need your help. Folks, if you want to help try and make this a reality, I'd like to really see if you can help me here by emailing or writing a respectful message to the British MOD, or maybe your local MP if you're from the UK, or just, reaching out to those who you may know in your community that can support something like this. Tag the British Army and the MOD on social media using the hashtag Save the Warrior. I'm going to start making it on my Instagram. If you're not on Instagram already, please follow me. But use the hashtag Save the Warrior. Share the video widely that I produced today. Let's make sure everyone hears about this effort. Together, I think, as a collective voice, we could potentially turn this into a reality. The museum team I've spoken to have been certainly interested in this particular possibility, and there'll be a lot more technicalities as to whether or not it could be made happen. I'm not the liaison for the museum. I wouldn't make the direct link between the actual transaction happening, but I can certainly pass those communications on and link somewhat together the contacts in the UK who can maybe work with the logistical support that may be needed or approval from our friends across the pond. So folks, let's do this. Let's save a piece of history from the scrapyard and give it to the honourable home that it deserves here in Canada. It's worked hard for many years in Canada, in Suffield, and it's protected our troops, trained generations of soldiers, and has directly shaped military relations between the UK and Canada. And it's time that I think I give something back and work to make this project a reality. Would it be a reality that comes to fruition? I don't know. I think it's a pretty big ask to have something that is designed as a piece of military hardware to be put into a museum that is not from the host nation that it's produced in. But my goodness, there's other vehicles around the world that have been given away and handed over to museums that are a lot more deadly and complicated in terms of ITAR and things like that. Folks, thanks so much for joining me today. Let's try and make this happen. If you find a way or a communication method that you think is going to work, try it. Send a letter, send an email, send a message to the British Army Instagram page, Facebook, whatever you can do to find a contact. Please let me know. If you find someone who think can help with this kind of transaction, please let me know. Again, I don't want to take, I'm not trying to take the showcase here and take a crown of saying, yeah, I did this. I just want it to happen. I couldn't care less who makes it a reality, but I'd love it to be a reality. I don't need my name to this. I'm not trying to showboat that I'm getting a warrior to Canada. I just want something that I think, in terms of history and heritage, needs to be put in place with the Canadian Tank Museum. So, folks, thanks so much for joining me today. Check out the video description below for all the details and the links that may help you with this particular activity, and let's make history together. Let's save the warrior. Hashtag save the warrior. Until next time, stay awesome, stay engaged, and let's try and make this happen. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.